Well, now that we have a little bit more info, I think it's safe to say we know pretty much how powerful the PlayStation 5 and the new Project Scarlett from Xbox is going to be. Let's talk about this. The gameplay featured here is brought to you by Player One Coffee. Coffee made by gamers, for gamers. Use the link in the description to get 5% off any of your purchases. Hey everybody, what is going on? Brandon here with a new video discussing the power and performance of the new PlayStation 5 and the Project Scarlett from Xbox. We got a little bit more information yesterday at E3 from Microsoft's press conference regarding the performance of the new Project Scarlett. We've also had some stuff come out that's confirmed from Sony regarding the PlayStation 5's performance and specs. And I think right now, with all the information we have a decent idea on what the performance is going to be like when these consoles launch. Based on all the specs that we're getting though, it does look like the PlayStation 5 and the Project Scarlett are going to be pretty much almost identical, the same way the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One were originally when they came out, at least hardware wise. We know that both consoles are going to be using Zen 2 architecture AMD CPUs. We know that the PlayStation 5 is going to be an 8-core. We have not actually gotten confirmation on how many cores the Xbox or the Project Scarlett is going to have, but if I had to guess, I would say it's also going to be an 8-core. We know both are using Radeon Navi architecture GPUs. We know they're both switching over to SSDs rather than mechanical because they both want to utilize the SSD's load times and also use it as virtual RAM rather than just storage. So this all plays a massive part in both price and performance. Now, when you've been working with video games and hardware as long as I have, you start to learn that basically if you want to see what the upcoming console is going to perform like, you got to look at the hardware that's currently available and that will give you an idea of what you're going to be getting 2 years from now or a year and a half from now, and that's what I did here. So if we want to know how Project Scarlett or the new PlayStation 5 is going to perform, we need to look at hardware that's available now or is going to be available here shortly to kind of get an idea of what the performance is going to be like around 2020 when these consoles launch. And for that, we have to look at the upcoming RX 5700, which is the Navi-based GPU they've got coming out. They're actually supposed to announce it and some more spec details for that this week, but we do have some details already to kind of give us an idea. And the biggest piece of that puzzle is just to figure out which NVIDIA GPU this AMD GPU is trying to compete against. And when we have that answer, we have an idea of the performance it's going to have. Now, this card is coming out to perform against the RTX 2070, so that gives us kind of an idea, kind of a benchmark as to what performance this kind of GPU is going to be, turning out. Now, when it comes to the amount of memory these GPUs are going to have, I think we're going to have to pretty much guess, at least until we get a little more information. Based on the pattern, though, with Sony and Microsoft, I'm going to say 16 gigabytes is probably what these are going to have at launch. We know that it's going to be GDDR6. The Xbox One X had 12 gigabytes of GDDR5, and based on the pattern of how that whenever they move a step up or a half step up, based on their patterns, I'm going to guess and say 16 gigs. I could be floored. It could be another 12 with it being faster RAM, or it could be 32. Who knows? But with the cost of memory nowadays and with the profit margins to make these consoles not very big, I don't see them spending that much money because they're really not going to be getting a lot of return on their investment. So if I had to put money on it, I would say these are going to be running about 16 gigs GDDR6 or 12. It just really depends. But if I had to put money on it, I would say it's going to be 16 gigs. As for storage, like I said at the beginning of the video, they are going to be switching over to SSDs rather than mechanicals. I'm not sure about PlayStation 5 or Sony's stance on this because they haven't really elaborated on it, because they did say they were going to be putting SSDs in the console, but for every article that I've read, they've not really confirmed whether that's just to benefit storage and boot times or if they're doing what Microsoft's doing and actually using it as virtual RAM. Now that does have me a little bit concerned though, at least as far as Microsoft and Xbox's side. If they're releasing this console and they're going to be using some of the SSD as a new kind of virtual RAM to reduce load times on games in between like loading screens, that does have me worry if they only release 1 terabyte versions at launch, which is generally what happens. I think Xbox One launched with a 500 gigabyte, Xbox One X launched with 1 terabyte. I see this one launching with 1 terabyte. It might launch with 2. But I only see it launching with 1, and with some of that being reserved for memory, I really do hope they don't get rid of the expandable storage on these consoles, at least not on launch. Now, as far as the boasted performance is concerned, now both Microsoft and Sony have come out and they've been very creative with the way they've been pitching the performance of these consoles. And you really got to pay attention to their wording and their way they use their wording to really understand what they're trying to say without getting overhyped. That's actually the biggest thing I wanted to cover in this video. Now, they've been boasting that these consoles are going to have 8K, 120 frames per second, 3D audio, 120 hertz refresh rate, and everybody's just freaking out. Like, what is this going to cost? What is this performance going to be like? You know, how did we get here? This is such a huge jump. Calm down. I want you to pump the brakes a little bit before you get too hyped, because while these consoles, I can guarantee, will have all of these features, they will do these things, they are not going to do them at the same time. We're not going to have a console come out at Christmas next year that's going to run 8K at 120 frames per second. We're not going to have a console that comes out at Christmas next year running 4K at 120 frames per second. If we do, I will eat crow, and I will humbly apologize. I just do not ever, for the life of me, see that happening. I don't. Maybe 4K 60 frames per second consistent. I could see that. I could see 120 frames per second at 1080p. But everybody thinking we're going to get 4K 120 frames per second consistent, you guys are dreaming. The ceiling right now, as far as tech is concerned, we know where the ceiling is. And when you're looking at consoles and you're looking at what's going to be coming out, you got to understand these consoles aren't coming out for another year and a half, 2 years, but they're being made today. They're being made with technology that exists today. So you got to look at where the ceiling is as far as hardware is concerned for us now, and how costly it is to get. If we were to try to get 8K 120 frames per second now, we could do it, but it would cost a small fortune. Probably upwards to $10,000 if we really wanted to be serious about it. 4K 120 frames per second, it would still cost probably a few $1,000s. I know I can run 60 frames per second at 4K, and my computer I've probably got about 1,500 wrapped into that I built. So that's not a whole lot, but that's a lot more than $400, $500 than people are willing to spend on a console. So as far as performance is concerned, I would expect 4K 60 frames per second consistent. I would expect 1080p 120 frames per second and 8K 30 frames per second. That's what I think these consoles will launch with. As for VR support, PlayStation has already confirmed they are going to be carrying over PlayStation VR support over to the PlayStation 5 with the current hardware. I don't know if they've said whether or not they're going to be creating more VR hardware for the PlayStation 5 or if they are just going to stick with the current VR. I would imagine they will upgrade eventually, especially if it's still making them money, that they will upgrade the same way Oculus and Vive does. As for Project Scarlett, I am sure it will have VR support. We know that Oculus partnered with Microsoft several years ago to bring Oculus support to Xbox One. Something fell through there. Nothing ever really came of it. We got an Xbox app on the Oculus store so we could play our Xbox games streaming in VR. But other than that, we really didn't get any kind of Oculus support for the Xbox. No VR support whatsoever. But over the year, we've seen Microsoft announce or come out with several mixed reality headsets, mixed reality support for their PC. So I really do think we are going to have VR support with the Project Scarlett. Now, whether that's going to be Oculus support or whether that's going to be Windows mixed reality support, that I have no idea. I'm actually really hoping that it's just an open source VR support that we can use Oculus, Vive, Windows Mixed Reality, OS VR. I think that would be really cool. I think that would be a step in the right direction. It would get a lot more people to buy the console if they could really choose which VR HMD they were going to use. I think that would be really cool. I don't see it happening, but I think it would be really cool. But I do think we will get some kind of VR support for Project Scarlett, at least to an extent. And lastly, for probably the most painful part of the video, is price point. What do we think these are going to be priced at? Now, there's nothing official been said, so we got to just base everything off what we've seen over the last, decade of gaming, the kind of patterns we've seen. We got to try to take a stab in the dark and guess. If I had to guess, I would say that the Project Scarlett is going to be releasing with a version with a disc drive at $599 on launch. That is my thought. They did say it's going to have a disc drive, but I see them also releasing a digital-only version either on launch or shortly after for $499. That is the price I see these being based on what stuff is costing now, it will probably cost a year and a half from now based on patterns. It just seems like that will probably be the direction it goes, because it'll have to be more expensive than the Xbox One X was on launch. it'll have to be. It's more powerful than the Xbox One X. So it's going to have to be at least a little bit more expensive. As for the PlayStation 5, they're usually always more expensive than Xbox on launch. So I'm going to guess and say $650 or $699. I think the PlayStation 5 is going to cost quite a bit more. I do think they will have a VR bundle. PlayStation does a lot more bundles than Xbox does. As much as I'd love a Halo bundle on launch, I don't see it at launch coming out, but I do see PlayStation 5 releasing some kind of launch bundles. They're usually the company that does a lot of bundle deals when they launch a console. So I see a PlayStation 5 bundle, maybe with VR, maybe with one of their big launch titles. But yeah, those are the prices that I see for these, just based on everything. Because you know they've got to be more expensive on launch than their predecessors were. Just based on everything. That's how things work. So that's my thoughts. Those are what I think the prices are. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments down below. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I know it wasn't exactly a game review. It was more covering the information we got at E3 and over the last couple weeks, but I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you like this video and you want to see more, please do me a favor and hit that red subscribe button. If you want to know anytime Nathan or I upload videos, please do me a favor and ring that bell icon so we'll be sure YouTube sends you notifications out. But thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all next time.